All right, let's go right to Chris Miles, NBA TV. Chris, what's going on, brother? How you doing, man?
Good. Just got off the plane from the draft last night, so I'm trying to get to a quiet place for you guys, my friend.
So you didn't stay for the second night, Chris? What? That's not good enough for you or something?
Hey, one night only, man. One night only.
Hey, that's how it used to be. But you know, they're talking to all the football teams to find out how they handle that time in between and try to manipulate things. But it's just ultimately, all in all, how do you think the Washington Wizards did last night?
Well, so it depends on who you talk to, right? If this comp that Alex Starr is like Evan Mobley, then I think that's a great pick for them. And if Bub Carrington, who's 18 years old, had a triple-double in his first ever college game, can be someone who develops into a really good player, if not a star in this league, then I love the draft. I don't like the kid they took at 27, who averages 7 points a game, but at 27, who cares? He doesn't have to be a great player. But the first two picks, I think, were quality picks. I had a lot of people tell me that Bub Carrington was a guy, like, I heard of him about a week before the draft, not someone that I had on my board. They're like, he's a super hooper. He's a basketball player that will figure it out. So a lot of the NBA guys, a lot of the scouts are really high on him. So I think that's a great pick. And I like how aggressive they were. I don't like losing Deni Avdija, who's still only 24 years old, to try to make that happen. But I think the Wizards weren't interested in paying Deni Avdija what he's going to command from teams that are trying to contend in the future. So I don't like that part of it. But the two players they got in the top 14, I think could really help this team try to turn things around in a few years.
But don't you think that if they felt they wasn't going to pay Deni, and they're not competing right now, it was best to let him go at this point.
Yeah, and that's kind of like, you know, we've talked about having a plan and having a vision and trying to figure out who you are as a team. Right now, this team seems to know who they are. And in years past, we couldn't say that, right? We're like, what are they trying to do? Are they trying to win now? Are they trying to be a team in the lottery? Well, they're going to be in play for, you know, Cooper Flagg, Ace Bailey next year. They're not going to win a whole bunch of games. I don't think so, at least, unless they make some more moves here in the next couple of weeks. And that's okay, right? Like they tore this thing down to try to get kind of the same run when they had John Wall and Bradley Beal and Otto Porter, you know, more than 11 years ago now. That's what they have to do. They need 2 or 3 years of trying to make the right picks in the draft to try to make this a competitive team again.
Kuzma, I kept waiting and thinking, would you invest in him at this point?
No, his timetable doesn't match up. Now, here's the thing. I thought Kyle Kuzma at the trade deadline was gone. Right? Yeah. Like, you look at teams. I mean, you go look at the team that was in the championship, right? The Dallas Mavericks.
Mm-hmm.
They were looking for a guy like Kyle Kuzma, and they ended up with P.J. Washington. I tell you what, I think if Kyle Kuzma was on that team instead of P.J. Washington, you know, they ended up with Daniel Gafford. I think the Mavs might have had enough offense to win it, right? Like, I think Kuzma would have been that X factor. I think he's a better offensive weapon than P.J. Washington. So I think teams are going to recognize that. They're going to see how Gafford was for the Mavs, and they're going to try to poach Kyle Kuzma when you get to that time of year when it matters most of teams are trying to win a championship.
Do you think that's completely out right now? We got to wait later, or could that happen today?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that could happen in the summer. I think with players like Kuzma and it's particularly a guy like Jordan Poole, right? Like, Poole's price tag is one of those things where the longer his contract goes along, the more valuable he may become to other teams who are like, okay, we can have that as an expiring contract. But right now, that Poole deal is really albatross, like, for other teams trying to take that on. And for the Wizards, if they're going to have all these rookie contracts and kind of be under the salary cap, it's not that big of a deal for them to have it. But I don't see Poole or Kuzma as being part of the long-term plan when I look at what this team is doing now. And that's the thing. I love the direction they're going in, because for so many years we didn't know what direction it was. Now we see what it is. And for me, I personally like Ron Holland the most in this draft. He went 5 to the Pistons. But I think if the Wizards reached and picked for him there would have been a lot of backlash. I think there's less pressure on Starr. A lot of people thought he should have been the first pick. and he didn't want to go to the Hawks, right? Like, first of all, let's look at what happened. Alex Starr, who you got at 2, spent 2 years in Atlanta at the overtime elite, and was like, you know what? I don't want to play for the Atlanta Hawks. I'm not going to go work out for them. Instead, he wanted to get picked by the Washington Wizards. So I think that's a positive sign where you see where this team is headed and how players are starting to view the organization and the direction they're in.
Yeah, that's something that people should be happy about, because I don't know many people who are saying I want to go play for the Wizards at first.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, I can't overlook Malcolm Brogdon coming in.
Yes.
We've all kind of encountered him before. He's a guy whose nickname is the president, right? Because he's a leader. He's a veteran. He's the kind of guy that doesn't complain a lot in the locker room. He's level-headed. I think when you draft a kid like Bub Carrington that's coming in at 18 years old, family from Baltimore, right, like kind of coming home, you want to have a vet on the team that can, you know, teach him the nuances of the game and can also, like, help him develop and learn to become a pro. I think that was really interesting to see Malcolm Brogdon come over. And, you know, once you get to the trade deadline, he's another guy that teams may covet to try to pick him up if they're trying to contend.
How realistic is it when the experts say that next year is another great haul in terms of young talent? And how do we stay engaged? What should we realistically expect out of this group as we say we're 2 seasons or more away?
Well, so when we say 2 seasons away, right? I mean, if you look at teams, like look at the Houston Rockets. They had a 19-win jump this year, right? They were down for, 4 or 5 years, and then they had the 19-win jump. I think the Wizards could look at it like if you win a couple of more games and Sarr develops, like you just want these guys like Koulibaly, you want them on the floor. Sarr, you want them on the floor. I mean, you know, it's 2 French dudes, so hopefully they get along in that way. But really, you just want these young guys to get enough playing time and not be spending time in the G League. And I think Koulibaly got that his rookie year. If you get that from Sarr, by the time you get to – if you end up with a top 3 pick, and that's kind of what you're hoping next year, and you get either Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey, or Cooper Flagg, if you get any one of those 3 guys, then you're ready. The wait is over. Like, you should be thinking like you're ready to compete. So when I say 3 years, I kind of backtrack it to last year as well. But these next 2 drafts are loaded with talent. When I ask people for comps, I mean, I asked Grant Hill for the comp of Cam Boozer, and he's like, man, that kid, I don't know, he reminds me of Tim Duncan. Oh, what about Cooper Flagg? I think he could be the best player on the championship team. Like, this is what Hall of Famers are saying about these kids that are coming in. So I think the Wizards should be in position to grab one of those. This draft wasn't built in that way. And hopefully Alex Starr is part of that, and he can be like the Evan Mobley type as the Wizards look to get back into contention.
Chris, you lived in this town for a while, and the fans have been waiting a long time. And I know I've heard them say 5 years and all that type of stuff. It has to be more than 5 years if you expect, you know, a lot of these fans to stay waiting. But the way they've worked over the last year or so shows me they have a hold on what they're doing. But will it be quick enough to where you don't have more people running away? Hello?
Yeah, did I lose you? Say that again, BMitch. You sounded really low. I'm sorry.
Yeah, what I was saying is you were here, and you know how long people have been waiting for this thing to happen. And the talk of 4 or 5 years turnaround, it has to be quicker than that for people to stay along. And I believe in them. I see them doing stuff, and it seems to be that they have a plan. But can it be quicker than that 4 or 5? Because it's a lot of money to spend to wait.
Well, to expedite the process, right? Like, to answer your question, to me, it's can you get the next star that's available? And the Wizards are starting to have assets. Like, you saw Deni Avdija was one of those assets, right? Where, okay, you got Kuzma, you got Jordan Poole, you got contracts you can move, you got draft picks, and you got young players. Now, I mean, a guy that I said that if he was in the mix for the Wizards, I thought Trae Young would be a good guy that they could go out and get, right? Because 1, you sell tickets. People be interested in box office. 2, could be a redemption tour for Trae Young because it's not going well for him in Atlanta. And 3, like he's been in the Eastern Conference Finals, right? So if you're looking to go expedite the process and go get a star the next time one is available, the Wizards are in position to do that now. And you and I have talked about this before. Bradley Beal was a really good basketball player. He was never that player. And I think it's just a couple of wasted years, like 3 of them, of, oh, Bradley Beal's our franchise guy. We're going to try. You're not going to win a championship with that. So I think for the Wizards, they got to make sure that when that player's available, whether it's the draft, a trade, free agency, that they're players and they go get that guy. That's the only other way you expedite that process.
All right.
Yeah, interesting. And it is real talk, whether we want to hear it or not, but we also need a bell cow. And I don't know if that person's been identified yet that puts the ball in the basket on a on-demand basis. And that's what I want to know, who that person is.
Well, so that's what I was kind of saying to you. Next year's draft, at the very top, we know that there's 2 or 3 of them.
Mm-hmm.
The following draft, there's 2 or 3 of those kids.
Okay.
We know it. For instance, Darren Peterson is a guy 2 drafts from now that we go, oh, what's his comp? You ask him, oh, what's his best comp? Devin Booker. Oh, what's his best comp? I don't know, this kid, some say they remind him, like a less explosive Kobe Bryant. Oh, what do you think about, Cam Boozer? Kind of like Tim Duncan, fundamentally. Like, those are the comps that they're making in 2 or 3 years from now.
Wow.
You didn't hear any of that in this draft, right? And then, I was actually talking to our draft guy last night who loves Cooper Flagg. I'm like, and he's like best prospect in years. Like, he's better than Zion, right? So we're going to see if that's true at Duke this year. But to that point, for the Wizards, it's like, are you willing to play, like you guys are saying, is the fan base patient enough to wait 2 or 3 years for that? Because you got to wait for next year's draft for that player to develop, blah, blah, blah. Or are they in a situation where can we go get a guy who's already there and trade the asset that teams think are going to land them that guy? That's really the key for the Wizards at this point.